When royalty meets the one brand that bows to no one, silence becomes the most powerful rejection. Meghan Markle wanted a bag, but not just any bag. It was supposed to be the ultimate symbol of her rebirth. A declaration that she wasn't just a duchess or a celebrity anymore, she was an icon. Her vision was precise, almost poetic. A one-of-one Hermès Birkin, handcrafted from ethically sourced white leather, finished with gold-plated hardware, and engraved with one of her own quotes, a line about empowerment that she'd once delivered in a speech about women rising above criticism. To her, it wasn't just fashion. It was a statement, a re-entry into high society with meaning stitched into every thread. Her team approached the idea with the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of controlling headlines. The proposal was drafted perfectly professional, respectful, but with just enough weight to remind Hermès who was asking. It was sent directly to Paris, to the brand's headquarters, along with a subtle note about her upcoming Montecito charity gala. The timing wasn't random. Meghan knew this appearance would be covered everywhere. A one-of-a-kind Birkin would complete the story, power, purpose, philanthropy, and prestige all woven together. But Hermès doesn't bend for anyone. To them, exclusivity is religion. When you ask for something custom, you're not requesting, you're challenging the code that keeps their world so untouchable. And when Meghan's email landed in their inbox, it didn't open doors. It froze them. Days later, a response arrived. Smooth, elegant, deadly. Madame, it began, Hermès does not accept external creative direction on heritage pieces. Our legacy is defined by the maison, not by collaboration. Translation, we don't take design tips from duchesses. It was the kind of message that could only come from Paris, polite on the surface, but cold enough to leave a mark. Meghan's camp was stunned. She wasn't told no often, at least not like this. Within hours, her senior stylist replied, trying to soften the exchange. They insisted this wasn't about ego, it was about innovation, a way to bring ethical luxury into the modern era. They framed it as a win-win, but Hermès never replied. Instead, word began to circulate quietly, deliberately. Whispers started in fashion circles, in the kind of cafes where deals and rumors share the same table. A duchess had tried to redesign a Birkin, a duchess had been turned down. The story spread without a source, without a headline, just whispers carried through Paris like cigarette smoke. Insiders knew who the duchess was, of course. They always know. Hermès hadn't rejected her in private, they'd made her an example. By the end of the week, the story had crossed the continent. Editors in Milan texted stylists in Paris. Luxury buyers in London mentioned it in passing at fashion dinners. Hermès refused her. No one used her name. They didn't have to. That was the beauty of the humiliation. It was elegant, subtle, and devastatingly public. For a woman who had built her empire on controlling her image, it was chaos. The one brand that symbolized ultimate prestige had quietly branded her as overreaching. In Paris, where status is currency, that's the equivalent of exile. But Meghan didn't retreat. She planned her counterattack. And her stage of choice, Paris Fashion Week, she would appear front row at Balenciaga, bold, confident, radiant. It would be her redemption moment. Cameras flashing, stylists whispering, headlines rewriting. It would make people forget the rejection, or at least that's what she hoped. When she arrived, every detail was meticulous. The outfit, the posture, even the timing of her entrance. But the air inside the venue was different. Cold, observant. People watched, but not with admiration, with calculation. A stylist later said, you could feel the room shift. It was like everyone was holding their breath. Photographers clicked, but half-heartedly. The applause, polite. The smiles, thin. Meghan had come to reclaim power, but the power had already moved on. And then, backstage, came the whispers again. Small, cruel, and impossible to control. Members of her glam team reportedly complained not about her attitude, not about her demands, but about something more human, more humiliating. You can fix makeup, one allegedly said, but you can't fix that smell. It was gossip, yes, but in Paris, gossip is weaponized with surgical precision. Within hours, it spread from stylists to assistants to journalists. The story turned from fashion to mockery. Cruel? Definitely. But in Paris, cruelty wrapped in couture is an art form. By the end of that day, no one was whispering about Balenciaga's designs. They were whispering about her. For Meghan, the attempt to rewrite the narrative had collapsed. And yet, what came next made it worse. After the show, Meghan reportedly took a quiet drive through the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, the same tunnel where Princess Diana's life ended. Her team called it a coincidence, but Paris doesn't believe in coincidences. Insiders whispered that she filmed herself driving through, that she wanted to channel Diana's legacy, to draw emotional parallels between their stories. It was meant to be symbolic, powerful, even sacred. But instead, it struck many as calculated. The city that once wept for Diana saw the act as performance, a staged echo of tragedy. And the irony didn't stop there. Meghan had often spoken out about how the British media destroyed Diana. Yet when it came time to tell her own truth, she sat down with CBS, the same network that had once paid for and aired images from Diana's fatal crash. Paris noticed. The fashion world noticed. The same cameras that profited from one royal tragedy were now framing another royal confession. To many, it felt hypocritical, the performance of pain sold back to the same machine that once exploited it. From that moment, the cracks began to show. Her speeches, once celebrated, started sounding repetitive. Her causes began to feel curated rather than lived. Insiders whispered that her philanthropic image was more branding than belief. Paris loves authenticity, one editor remarked, but it despises performance. Meghan's problem wasn't scandal. Paris thrives on scandal. Her problem was sincerity, or rather, the lack of it. Behind closed doors, designers who once praised her style began withdrawing invitations. PR teams quietly removed her name from guest lists. Collaborations evaporated. In private meetings, stylists and managers started using a new phrase, "Don't pull a Meghan." It became fashion shorthand for overexposure, for ambition that oversteps into arrogance. A quiet warning about the danger of believing your own spotlight. Still, even in exile, Meghan remained a fascination. Because in the world of luxury, downfall is entertainment. The same people who mocked her in whispers still followed her every move. They couldn't help it. Scandal has gravity, and Meghan's story, her rise, her fall, her defiance, was addictive. Every headline, every sighting, every rumor kept her relevant. Weeks later, whispers started again, different this time, softer, intrigued. She was working on something new in Montecito, they said. Something secret, something powerful. It wasn't about luxury this time. It was about control. A new project, a new image, a reinvention built not on royal titles or designer bags, but on her own narrative. The woman Hermès rejected was quietly building a new brand, not of fashion, but of identity. And that's the thing about Meghan Markle. She doesn't vanish. She recalibrates. She studies the silence, learns its rhythm, and turns it into strategy. Every rejection becomes material. Every rumor becomes marketing. Every insult becomes content. While the world debates her sincerity, she keeps working, rebuilding, reframing, rewriting. Paris might have turned its back, but it hasn't forgotten her. It never does. The city that once whispered her name in admiration now waits in silence, curious about what comes next. Because that's the paradox of scandal. It feeds the very fame it tries to destroy. And Meghan knows it. Every designer who dismissed her still watches her. Every editor who rolled their eyes still checks her next headline. In fashion, nothing truly dies. It just gets reimagined. She'll return not to ask, but to dictate. Not to borrow, but to own. And when she does, the same city that mocked her will lean in again, pretending it always believed. That's how Paris works. It doesn't forgive. It forgets temporarily until the next headline reminds it why it cared in the first place. So the question isn't if Meghan Markle will return, it's how. Because in this world, the world of power, prestige, and performance silence is never the end. It's just the pause before the next act. She may have been whispered out of the room once, but every whisper eventually becomes an echo. And echoes, if you listen closely enough, always find their way back. And when that moment comes, when Meghan steps back into the light, whether it's Montecito or Paris, every camera will turn, every critic will look up, and every person who once doubted her will wonder the same thing. What if this time she wins?